I never believed in the phenomenon people refer to as the light at the end of the tunnel. These are those rare times when people wake up after nearly dying and exclaim, "I saw the light," with sweat on their faces. Yet here I am in this supposed tunnel. But how did I die? The last thing I remember is being alone in my room, looking at the city from above. After that, my body felt heavy as I lay down on my bed. Was I poisoned? Was I assassinated? That was the first thought that slammed into my mind, a jarring question in the void. Think gray. I urged myself, forcing my mind to work. Too many wanted me dead. After all, a grim understanding dawned. I was a king. But as much as I craved answers about my death, the how and the why felt distant, unimportant, somehow. Well, as much as I want to figure out my death, I can't do anything about it anymore. No choice but to go along with it. My senses shifted, the blackness receding, and a muted light crept in. There better be the best choir of babies wailing at the end, I thought, with a dark, sardonic humor. Then a warm, booming voice cut through the haze. "Congratulations, sir and madam, he's a healthy boy." A baby's cry, loud and persistent, filled the air. Was I just given birth to? The newborn thought, a startling question for someone so new to the world. The room was blurry, and the voices indistinct, but he heard a woman's voice. "Hold him a bit further away, dear. I can't see." His newborn mind raced. Does that mean that the light at the end of the tunnel is the light coming through a woman's? And no, that's not important. Closer now, he heard the woman again. "He's beautiful." And then a man's voice, filled with pride. "He has your hair." Wherever he was, he could understand the language, and he took it as a good sign. A bright and gentle smile, radiating motherly love. He couldn't help but think how beautiful and charming she was. "He has your eyes, honey," she said softly. He focused on the man. With a strong jaw and fiercely sharp brows, I'm sure this man is strict and serious. The man, his supposed father, spoke. "Hi, little Art. I'm your daddy. Can you say that?" The woman, exhausted but amused, replied, "Ray, he was just born." Never mind, thought the baby. My surroundings seemed normal enough, as he tried to process everything. The flickering candlelight danced across the wooden floor, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets in the quiet room. A thought bubble emerged, followed by then a single eye filled with a deep, inquisitive blue stared out in bewilderment. It quickly morphed into the face of a baby held in the arms of a woman, her eyes soft and warm. The baby's expression was one of confusion, as a new thought appeared. Where am I? Weeks slowly trickled by. A humble house with a thatched roof became the backdrop to a new life. The story then shifted to the baby, now a toddler, being embraced by his parents. Although my mother, Alice, was a gentle and kind-hearted person, she held the reins tightly in the family. The narration began. My father, Reynolds, was a dependable and charismatic man, if you ignored his occasional childishness. While I was thankful that I had been born to a loving family, the narration continued, the tone now tinged with a hint of melancholy. My life was filled with difficulties that I wouldn't wish upon even my enemies. I was a king once, a representative of my country, and now, here I am, in this prison of flesh, little command over my limbs, unable to even control the most basic bodily functions. But perhaps years of mental fortitude honed as a king were the only thing keeping me sane, a faint hope that this was all a dream. It seemed I'd been transported to the past, to a much more archaic period. Did people actually carry around weapons in the past? I guess I'm supposed to assume those vials of suspicious-looking liquids that they pass off as medicine are being sold legally. Elixirs great for endurance, just 2 coppers. My little Art must be tired. How about we go head back home now? As we walked through town, someone said, I'll take 3 elixirs for my husband. Knowledge is strength. I've assessed my surroundings over the past weeks, and I'm confident that I have a firm grasp on what to expect. Daddy's home. How's my little man doing? Ray, with a mischievous grin, throws the baby high into the air, causing a whoosh of air around the startled infant. His wife, looking utterly horrified, shouts, Ray, what are you going to do if you drop him? The baby, caught midair, looks utterly distressed, his face turning purple, and a single tear escapes his eye. The narrator's inner thoughts reveal his utter dismay. As expected of such a fragile body, to think I would be reduced to this state by a mere toss. Ray, seemingly unfazed by the baby's distress, laughs heartily, catching the baby in a gentle embrace. Haha, my father did this when I was younger. he exclaims, tossing the baby up again. The mother, though still concerned, smiles slightly. Look, dear, I think our little boy is having fun. However, another toss sends the baby reeling, and another cry escapes his lips. Ray continues to toss the baby into the air, a series of whoosh sounds accompanying each throw, while his mother is screaming Ray. Suddenly, a loud thuck is heard, and the panels abruptly shift to the baby, crying inconsolably in Ray's arms, while the mother looks on with a serene smile. Ray, with a sheepish look, clutches the whimpering baby close, and a shadow looms over them, accompanied by a low, guttural GROA. The little tyke, all red-faced and bawling, let out a string of gibberish I can only assume were baby curses. Poor little thing. Mama swooped in, her hand glowing with a gentle green light, and touched the little one's foot. Suddenly, the crying stopped, and those big, innocent blue eyes opened up. There, all better, Mama cheered, hoisting the babe up in the air. But I think I spoke too soon. The baby just stared blankly, almost thoughtfully. A wave of unexpected humility washed over me. Perhaps I know nothing of this world after all. In my previous life, I was a king. I led armies, rode into battle, sword raised high, a symbol of unwavering strength. But this is different. He had outdueled representatives from countries all over the world. Yet, out of all my accomplishments, I have never been as proud as I am in this moment. A deep voice rumbled, tinged with a hint of amusement. Then we see a chubby-cheeked baby with a determined pout, and the words, "I can crawl, baby," bursting forth in a burst of confidence. And he does. The little tyke, tongue sticking out in concentration, is off. Dash! His mom is standing guard, her face a mixture of worry and wonder, while his dad, kneeling down, offers words of caution. Ray, make sure he doesn't hit his head on that corner, he urged. Okay, you block him from getting near that shelf. His determination and crawling practice leads to the tiny top bump straight into a mirror. He sits back, staring at his reflection with wide, surprised eyes. He had accomplished something incredible, and now he was taking it all in, face to face with his very own reflection. Ah, look, Art is looking at himself in the mirror. Little Art, face flushed and eyes wide, stares back at himself, a hint of mischief already sparkling in those blue depths. But inside his head, the little dude is thinking, it's been months, and I'm still not used to my new name. As a former king, Art is a little too cute for me. Then, he catches another glimpse of himself in the mirror. A tiny baby version of, well, him. His eyes widen slightly, and a tiny smile starts to creep across his face. Although, looking at myself here, the former king muses, I have to admit that I'm absolutely adorable. He giggles, a delighted sound escaping his baby lungs as he reaches for his reflection, his smile widening, displaying how adorable the little Art is. The mischievous sparkle in his eyes returns with a vengeance. Watch out, future ladies. Prepare to be heartbroken, he internally proclaims, already plotting his future conquests even in his diaper. Oh, look at Arthur, trying to reach his reflection. His father chuckled, sitting cross-legged on the floor, while his mother, a warm smile gracing her face, watched on with amusement. Little Arthur was babbling away, reaching his chubby hands towards the shiny surface of the mirror, his parents erupting in laughter around him. Later that night, nestled in his bed, a gentle kiss marked on his cheek, Arthur was fast asleep. Sweet dreams, my little Art, his mother whispered, her eyes full of love. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open. Mission start. An unspoken plan formed in his tiny mind. He sat up, peering over the edge of his crib, a determined glint in his bright blue eyes. He grabbed his blanket, tossed it out of the crib, and then, with all his might, tumbled after it. He crawled over to the wooden fence, his brow furrowed in concentration as he struggled to climb over. A determined little rumble marked his progress. There, he was over, a triumphant smile spreading across his face. It was time for adventure. Bam! Little Arthur crashes down onto the soft cushion, feigning sleep. Now that Alice thinks I've fallen asleep, he thinks, a mischievous glint sparking in his bright blue eyes, I have approximately an hour or so before she comes back to check up on me. A bead of sweat trickles down his chubby cheek as a wicked little smile plays on his lips. He's off, scrambling down from the cushion, his tiny hands and feet find purchase on the wooden floorboards. Alice, humming a sweet little tune, is completely oblivious, carrying a stack of plates down the hall. Little does she know, adventure awaits just around the corner. Arthur's determined gaze is fixed on his target, destination within reach. He thinks his little face set with purpose. Full speed ahead. And with that, he's a blur of baby limbs, crawling with surprising speed through the dimly lit hallway. He reaches the doorway and peeks around the corner, his eyes wide with curiosity. It's the forbidden room, the study, overflowing with books and scrolls. A little table glows warmly with the light of a flickering candle, illuminating scattered papers. He pumps his tiny fist in the air, a silent cheer of victory escaping him. The adventure has begun. Success, he exclaimed, a tiny fist punching the air, a triumphant grin spreading across his cherubic face. He'd done it. But what exactly? Well, ever since he'd discovered this hidden place, he'd been sneaking in every night to learn more about this world. Peeking between the shelves, his eyes wide with curiosity, he devoured any bit of knowledge he could find. Dicathan, the continent where he was born, comprised of 3 major kingdoms. Elenoir, the Elven Kingdom, nestled deep within the forest, a place of ancient trees and whispered secrets. Then there was Darv, the vast underground kingdom, home to the dwarves, a civilization carved into the very heart of the earth. Here's the grand kingdom of Sapin, easily the most densely populated region of the entire land. It was clear that, much like my old world, this one also had a monarch system. Though, here, rulership wasn't earned, it was simply inherited. I quickly came to the conclusion that this world was vastly underdeveloped compared to the one I came from. And the reason for the lack of technological advancement, well, I was about to find out. Wandering around the castle's massive library, filled with towering bookshelves, I squeezed between 2 books, eyes wide with curiosity. I reached for a large tome, but my tiny baby hands weren't quite strong enough. The heavy book tumbled down, and so did I, landing with a soft thud. Determined, I reached up, my little arms straining as I tried to hoist myself up. I wanted to learn everything. Ah, here it is. The words burst from the character as he discovers a worn, leather-bound book titled Beginner's Guide for the Privileged Mage. It seemed to be exactly what he was searching for. He carefully flips through the pages, the ancient text filled with strange runes and simple diagrams. I think this is where I left off. He muses, pausing on a page, illustrating stick figures and indecipherable writing. He continues, now lost in thought. In my old world, we had a life force called Ki, used by practitioners to strengthen their bodies and weapons through rigorous training. This world has a similar force called mana. Unlike, which they say only exists inside a person, this mana thing, it's all around us, apparently. It's everywhere. Then we cut to this adorable, tiny baby, all sprawled out on what looks like a massive desk. He's got this open book in front of him, scribbling away like he's trying to decipher ancient runes or something. I mean, he's practically face first in the book, scratching at the pages with his little fingers. Cursed diaper rash. The narration bubbles over him as we get a close-up. Oh man, poor little dude is clearly uncomfortable, scratching away at his backside. You can see the little wince in his face. It makes you want to reach out and give him some baby powder. Anyway, the story switches gears again. Apparently, the power to control this mana is mostly genetic. They're saying only 1 in 100 children possess the ability. That's not that common. So, what do they do with this mana then? Well, it can be used in various ways, we're told. The 2 most common methods are augmenting and conjuring. Augmenting, they explain, is where the mana users enhance their bodies with it, gaining incredible strength, defense, and agility. The image shows the person surrounded by arrows, which indicates that this person is getting mana somehow. Then comes the conjurer. In the picture, the gray shadow human being is wearing wizardly robes, and the same kind of light is shining from the center of his body. Conjurers emit mana into the world, bending their surroundings to their will. However, their weakness lies in their limited range. They must supplement their own mana core with mana from the outside world to form spell. But my mother was something different, what they called a deviant, more specifically an emitter. They're a rare type of mage, able to cast unique restorative mana. According to this book, A Voice Mused, a mage's first awakening happens between early adolescence to late teenage years, when their mana core manifests. A small child, no older than a toddler, stared thoughtfully into the distance, his brow furrowed in concentration. The mana core, the voice continued, sounded uncannily similar to the key center of my previous life. In that past life, Children were taught to meditate, to sense the fragments of ki scattered within their bodies, and gather them into a single point. I wonder, the voice whispered, and two small hands reached out into the darkness. The scene shifted, showing the toddler sitting cross-legged, eyes closed in deep concentration. A soft, ethereal light began to emanate from his small chest, growing brighter and brighter with each passing moment. The child's face was serene, eyes shut, as flecks of green energy danced around him. A brilliant, radiant glow now pulsed from the center of his being, a testament to his focused effort. It seemed he was trying to awaken his mana core early, using techniques from a past life. "It's working. It's war," an unknown voice exclaimed triumphantly before abruptly cutting off. Then, suddenly, a tiny baby, Art, is scooped up by a large hand. "Grab," is all that's said as he's whisked away from wherever he was. "There you are, Art," worrying me like a woman, presumably his mother, says with a relieved smile as she cradles him in her arms. Her brow then furrows with concern. "Oh, honey, are you having trouble taking a poopy?" Inside Art's mind, a storm is brewing. "Mother, I'm about to begin my journey to become the greatest mage in this world. Do not make me out to be a constipated infant." A moment of silence, then PSSS. The mother's face brightens again. "Phew, I guess you didn't have any trouble. Time to change your diaper." It turns out that amidst my concentration, I had indeed soiled my diaper. It's been a little over 2 years now, yet it still feels like I'm learning more and more about my baby each passing day. I've reached the conclusion that Arthur has to be the most adorable baby in the world, with his little batch of auburn hair and azure eyes that look at me almost intelligently. I know he will get into trouble in the future if I don't become a strict and dependable mother. It's not like I can rely on Ray. The moment Arthur gripped that makeshift wooden sword, you could practically hear the whoosh as his tiny hands tightened around it. He was barely able to crawl, yet his father, bless his oblivious heart, was already trying to teach him how to fight. His mother, well, let's just say she wasn't thrilled. I caught him trying to teach our baby how to fight. "For goodness sake," she furiously scratched out on parchment, her anger palpable even through the ink. And this was when he could barely crawl. Years passed. Arthur grew, no longer a crawling infant, but a toddler with a fascination for the small merchant strip in central Ashbur. His mother noticed how his eyes lit up whenever they approached the area, especially the building with the crossed swords and shield sign. That place fascinated him. Arthur, now a toddler on her back, would stretch his little arms, trying to reach the intriguing sign. He really liked that place. So, rather than shopping for groceries once or twice a week, we go downtown every other day. The little boy, Arthur, gurgled with delight as he saw something glistening, his eyes wide with wonder. "Gleam!" he exclaimed, his mother holding him close. Later, his eyes grew even wider as he stared at his father, a magic staff in hand, a captivating light emanating from his fingertips. I'm not spoiling him, as he put on a little show for Arthur with his magic. The mother chuckled, but worried as she thought, it's to have fresh food in the house, and for educational purposes. Looking at Arthur, she mused, watching Arthur grow up so quickly, I wonder how he will be when he's older. As she wrote in her journal, with Ray as his father, I have no doubt that he'll have an interest in becoming an adventurer, but I can't help but worry. I can only hope he fares better than the naive young teens hoping to make it big as adventurers. Now, if only I could do something about his perpetual habit of sneaking into the study. I thought, peeking out of the doorway, watching the little rascal crawl towards the forbidden room. I'm tempted to move his crib into the study. I considered picking him up, holding him close, but that's for another day. Time passed, marked by the familiar thump of cleaning the writing desk, the dip of a quill into ink, and a woman writing at her desk. Then a little boy, not so little anymore, stands at the window looking out. 2 years have passed since I first made my difficult journey to the study. As he grew, so did his world. Now he stands, a determined little figure, looking up at the tall man in the garden, a man no longer wearing gloves, but tossing them into the air with a confident look. Okay, so there's this guy, kind of muscular, wearing a tank top, and he's practicing something. He's holding his hands out, palms up, and the word raise is floating near his hands. He seems focused. Cut to a little box where someone's saying, I've learned a lot since then, but it's been fascinating learning new things every day. It's a reflective moment. Then we see a little kid, a chibi-style character, peeking out from behind a wooden railing, looking curious. Back to the first guy. He's chanting something like an incantation, but it's all weird symbols. In another panel, someone is saying he's been chanting something for a few minutes now, and he's concentrating really hard. The man is now standing on a grassy field, holding his hands out, still chanting. We zoom in to show a rock sitting in the grass with some dark water around it. Then we see the same rock, but now the word lift is written next to it. The man is concentrating hard. Energy is radiating off of him, drawn into the pose he is holding. The chibi kid is now looking wide-eyed and exclaims, I wonder what sort of magical phenomenon he'll conjure. Shum. Rocks begin to fall as a man stands with his arms raised, trying to stop them. A child below looks up in shock. That's, he exclaims. The man stands in front of a building, arms raised against a shower of rocks. He braces himself, and with a grunt his eyes narrow with focus, and he bursts forward with a ha. A small explosion of dirt and stone erupts as he punches the ground, creating a cloud of dust. The child, watching from a distance, stares blankly. The man, now looking at the child through a window, seems proud. Your daddy is awesome. Huh, he shouts. The child, now flushed with embarrassment, thinks to himself, that's it. 3 minutes of your utmost concentration to finally swing something you can physically throw with less effort. The little boy, wide-eyed and curious, peered through the window, a tiny hand resting beneath his chin. His mother, her brown hair neatly tied back, smiled gently and patted his head. Are you watching your dad dash? She started to ask, but then sighed dramatically. Oh, for goodness sake, he ruined the front yard again. Outside, the father, a strong man with dark hair and tan skin, knelt in the grass, pulling weeds. He wore thick gloves and a determined expression, clearly putting a lot of effort into his task. Meanwhile, back inside, the little boy continued to watch his father. He was deep in thought. I learned fairly early on that my father was an augmenter, he mused internally. A spark of curiosity shone in his blue eyes. I wonder what I'll be when my mana core awakens. It started with a fierce intensity in his eyes, a focused determination etched on his face. His arm lashed out, a whirlwind of motion culminating in a powerful punch. Swoosh! Echoed the sound, the force behind the blow evident even in the illustration. He didn't stop there. A kick followed, 3 trails of wind, fwoosh, 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 slicing through the air as his leg connected with a resounding thud. The impact sent his opponent flying backward, a visible FWM marking their crash into the ground. Meanwhile, inside a cozy home, a little boy, brown hair neatly combed, peered out a window. He rested his chin on his clasped hands, a peaceful smile gracing his face as he watched something unfold outside. He seemed content, lost in his world of observation, unaware of the fierce battle that had just transpired. As the view shifts to the back of his head, it appears he lost interest, his world and thoughts shifting away from what he saw from the window. From behind, a small boy with brown hair sits on a wooden bench, seemingly lost in thought as he gazes at a yellow butterfly fluttering nearby. We then see the whole room, a simple space with wooden walls, a window, and a brick fireplace. The boy is now seated on the bench next to a woman, her back to us. Suddenly, we are shown a close-up of the boy peering through an opening, a look of worry etched on his face. Then, there's a shot of him looking down, his eyes filled with sadness, even tears. And all that is seen are her bare feet standing on a wooden floor. The boy is back on the bench, looking forlorn. He clambers down from the bench, his legs trembling slightly. We see the woman's face, a look of loving concern in her eyes. Next, we are back to the boy, lying down and looking tired. The woman says softly, "Your eyes are half closed, baby." She then cradles him in her arms, saying, "Looks like someone needs a nap," kissing his forehead gently. We see them from a slightly lower angle as she holds him. Finally, the boy points towards a room with a table, exclaiming, "Mama, books." But the woman replies with a loving smile, "Not now, honey. You know it's nap time. Maybe after." Arthur's mom, Alice, says with a bright smile, her eyes twinkling as she glances down at her son. Arthur, peeking from under his blanket, gives her a rather dubious look. No choice, he thinks to himself, a bead of sweat trickling down his forehead. He knows exactly what he has to do. With a determined little push, he launches his master plan into action. A radiant sparkle emanates from him as he clasps his hands together, eyes wide and brimming with innocent plea. "Please, Mama." "Books?" he asks in the sweetest, most endearing voice he can muster. His mom's resistance immediately cracks. Her eyes widen, stars pop around her head, and the baby talk defenses crumble. Ah, he thinks triumphantly, as he's flung upwards in the air. Alice, holding him aloft, still attempts to resist, but the cuteness is clearly overwhelming. She squirms, blushing and gritting her teeth in adorable frustration. Okay, you can play in the study for a little bit. She relents, finally succumbing to his charm. As she walks away, she mutters to herself, I am not a doting mother. Boys his age need a lot of play, and I baby-proof the room. Meanwhile, little Arthur, perched on the wooden floor of the study, gazes at her retreating figure, a calculated glint in his eyes. It is not demeaning. A great warrior must utilize every weapon in his arsenal, he thinks, contemplating his next move. He settles down with the forbidden books, and Alice is later startled by a loud crash emanating from the study. She turns to the room, her eyes filled with worry. Oh no, she muttered, worry etching lines on her face. Your father better not have knocked down another tree. With that, she turned and called out, I'll be right back, Art. Little Arthur, oblivious to the potential tree-related drama, sat cross-legged, engrossed in a thick tome. He was a peculiar child, his bright blue eyes reflecting an intelligence far beyond his years. My biggest accomplishment, he thought to himself, aside from the vast knowledge he had already accumulated, is my progress in forming my mana core. For the past 2 years, he had been meticulously working towards this goal. He spent countless hours moving the tens of thousands of tiny fragments of mana inside his body, carefully gathering them together near his solar plexus. His face, normally so animated, was now still and focused as he concentrated on the task at hand. The light around him started to glow, as little Arthur continued the process of forming his mana core. I can see why it would take until adolescence to form naturally, he mused, feeling the sweat bead on his brow as he focused intently. The fragments, whatever they were, seemed to gravitate slowly toward the center of his body. Seeing how slowly these fragments gravitate toward the center of my body, he added, the arduous task etched on his face. He was still just a child, sitting cross-legged on the floor, a thick tome open before him, a faint glow emanating from his small form. It is an arduous task, both for my body and mind, he thought, a bead of sweat trickling down his cheek. But despite the challenge, there was determination in his eyes. But these 2 years have not gone to waste, he affirmed to himself. I'm almost there. Meanwhile, outside, a man strained, pushing against a massive tree trunk, his muscles bulging with effort. Standing nearby, a woman with a kind smile watched him, holding a drink in her hand. She was proud of his hard work and their growing home. The sky was a clear, untroubled blue, save for the 2 birds circling above, carefree and majestic. But the serenity was shattered moments later. Just one last piece, she muttered, her face alight with a strange mixture of focus and anticipation. Then a deafening boom erupted, sending debris flying and the ground shaking. She stood amidst the chaos, holding a small, glowing shard in her hand, her eyes wide with something between triumph and terror. Standing before her, a man with brown hair was in focus. With superhuman speed, the man dashed toward her, pulling her in his arms just as the explosion's shockwave threatened to engulf them both. Ssh. The sound was like a rushing torrent of fire, and the world turned into a blinding flash of light and fury. When the dust settled, the scene was one of devastation, but also of a profound, almost unbelievable connection. The man held her close, his body a shield against the blast. The sound was akin to wind as dust particles fell to the floor from the explosion, the dust surrounding the 2 people. As the fog cleared, revealing their battered forms, blood trickled from cuts on their faces and limbs. He looked at her, concern etched on his features. You okay, honey? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. She, still stunned, could only manage a single word, filled with awe and perhaps a hint of something else. Art. Eliza's eyes widened in horror, the whites showing as she yelled, Art. She was being held back by a man, clearly wanting to go back into the burning building. Desperation laced her voice as she screamed, Art's still in there. The man holding her back looked determined, but a hint of fear was etched on his face. There was a cut near his ear, and his knuckles were scraped. He was obviously fighting back his own pain. He didn't hesitate. With a determined yell, he turned and dashed back into the inferno. Dash! The sound effect exploded off the page as he ran, debris flying everywhere. He was a man on a mission. Crack! Something impacted against him as he fought his way deeper. His face contorted in pain and determination. Eyes wide, sweat beading on his brow. He gritted his teeth, pushing forward. His eyes burned with intensity, blood trickling down his face. He finally emerged, battered and bruised. With a thud, he landed heavily, clearly exhausted but resolute. He was laughing, a hollow, broken sound echoing in the air. Reynolds was his name, but something was very wrong. His face was scarred, tears streamed down his cheeks, and he looked much older than he should have been. Reynolds, what's wrong? His mother, panicked, tried to reach him. You gotta be kidding me. Her voice broke, realizing the truth dawning on her. He's not even 3. Then a whirlwind of motion, a burst of blinding light, and suddenly the world shifted. A small child stood amidst the rubble, the remains of what was once their home, surrounded by splintered wood and shattered stone. Wow, I feel great, he exclaimed, his face alight with joy. So this is what it feels like to have a manicore. He stretched out his tiny arms, taking in the world with renewed wonder. Even the trees looked greener. But then a flicker of confusion crossed his face. Trees! He looked around, his smile fading as he took in the devastation, the shattered remains of everything he knew. Wait a minute, he thought, a wave of disorientation washing over him. What the hell? Reality began to settle in, bringing with it a chilling realization. He was no longer the man he remembered being. He was a child, reborn into a world on the brink of destruction, lying on a small bed inside a wooden house. A book lay open beside him, forgotten, as the memories of his past life began to surface, a stark contrast to the innocence of his new existence. Over the past year, things have been quite busy for the little one. Along with his mother teaching him how to read and write, though perhaps teaching was too strong a word for the amount of knowledge he seemed to absorb on his own, he had also begun to learn the basics of mana manipulation and augmentation. At first, because his body was far too small for any real sparring, they focused on basic body workouts. There were runs, with him struggling to keep up with his much taller father, and rest periods afterwards, collapsing in exhaustion beneath the trees. Then came the exercises, push-ups and other movements that challenged his tiny frame. It wasn't too long ago, however, when his father finally decided he was ready to practice. It all started with a wooden sword, a gift from his father on his 3rd birthday. That simple toy held so much significance. Years later, it is suspended in a dark space, memories swirling around it like motes of light. He remembers being a toddler, lying on his stomach, poring over books. The quiet of the room was shattered one day as his father burst in, papers scattering like fallen leaves. Brock, it's time to train, champ. I have your sword now. Come on. The interruption caused the boy to fall onto the table. Outside in the yard, his father stands before him, giving instructions. Now remember what I taught you. Match the flow of mana with your breathing. Just like your heart or lungs, your core is just another organ. The boy, only a child, held his little wooden sword, a touch of confusion in his eyes. I wonder if most 4-year-olds would understand these abstract instructions. He thought, despite the difficult concepts, he persisted. He is pictured with his father and his wooden sword, his face etched with determination. Then comes the swing, the thwack, as his sword connects with a practice target. The focused concentration in his young eyes as he trains, and then the thump as his training session commences. Arthur's dad stood tall and proud, a smirk playing on his lips as he encouraged his son. Come on, I think you can do it, he boomed. Whack, whack, whack. The sounds echoed around Arthur as he swung with all his might. Little Arthur, face contorted in determination, swung with a swing-fueled grunt. Inside, he was thinking, he's not going to let me rest until I do this, and I only have a little bit of time to study before dinner. He steadied his stance, focusing every fiber of his being on the task at hand. With a battle cry of smash, Arthur swung the wooden sword with all his strength. Whoosh! The sword finally made contact. Arthur's dad stumbled back, the wooden sword clattering to the ground with a thud. He looked surprised. A tiny cloud of dust rose in the air where the sword had landed. Arthur, slightly sweaty and catching his breath, looked up at his dad with a hopeful, almost innocent expression and asked, "Can I go study now?" "Why, sure, Art," a voice stammered, filled with uncertainty. A young boy sat cross-legged on a bed in a warmly lit room, bathed in the sunlight streaming through the window. In this world, strength is measured by the color of your mana core. The mana core starts off black, due to the body's blood and other impurities mixing with the mana particles, forming the mana core. The mana core becomes more pure as the impurities are filtered out over time. The order goes as follows: black, red, orange, yellow, silver. Hey Arthur, a voice calls out, breaking his concentration. He's clearly annoyed, scowling as he hears. Time for dinner. He grumbles, curses. Cut to the dinner table, where a simple meal of meat, carrots, and peas sits on a plate next to a glass of water. Arthur's mom takes a bite, the sound of silverware clinking echoing in the room. His dad does the same, a look of resignation on his face as the clink continues. Arthur, meanwhile, looks absolutely fed up, sitting there with his fork and knife, thinking, can't a baby get some alone time around here? How else am I supposed to learn? As clink is heard from him too. His dad then turns to his mom and says, honey, it's clear that Arthur is not happy about having to stop his practice for dinner. I think it's time we get Art a proper mentor, the woman declared, her voice carrying a tone of conviction. Her husband, a man clad in armor that hinted at countless battles, responded with a determined nod. He's our true symbol, he exclaimed, recalling how his wife had effortlessly decimated a training squad with her magic. Besides, you and I aren't able to teach him. The man thought about his son's amazing talent. I never expected our son to be such a mana manipulation prodigy at 4 years old, he said. He clenched his fists, feeling a heavy responsibility. I'm holding him back. He's got so much potential. His wife spoke, her words showing her frustration. I'm not sending my child away. I'd have to leave home to live hundreds of miles away. The scene changed to the family at dinner. The young boy, Art, sat quietly sighing. The air was thick with unspoken feelings, the parents' thoughts swirling like storm clouds. The man, hitting the table with his hand, brought the conversation to a head. Both parents looked closely at their son, their faces showing worry and hope. Art, you have a say in this as well, the father said, pointing to his son. Do you want to go to a big city and have a real teacher? The boy looked up, surprised and unsure. Wait, he's letting me decide, he thought. Isn't this a bit too much to ask of a 4-year-old? Someone nervously gulped something down. A young boy sat at the table, food in front of him, and asked, can't mommy and daddy come too and meet teacher together? His simple question surprised his parents. They looked at each other, a mix of surprise and guilt on their faces. The boy, sensing something was wrong, looked uncertain and started to panic. Did I say something wrong? Was my sentence too complicated? He was clearly worried that he messed up. He was close to tears. A single tear started to fall. His father laughed loudly, trying to ease the tension. I guess we really didn't think about all of us going together. His mother smiled, touched by the child's request. I might feel better about this if I'm there when he's tested and meets his teacher. The father got excited. His face lit up and he slammed his hands on the table, scattering food. Then it looks like we're all going to Xyrus City. The boy, hearing all the excitement, was shocked and overjoyed that his parents were already planning for the 3-week journey. There's a glimpse of some kind of ancient writing, hinting at mysteries and secrets that might be connected to the story. I thought I saw it here somewhere. Arthur mumbled, his brow furrowed in concentration as he peered at the open book. His little fingers gently turned the pages, his blue eyes scanning the lines of text with surprising focus for a toddler. But the words would have to wait. You need to get to bed, mister, his mother, Alice, playfully scolded, swooping down to scoop him up. We're heading out early tomorrow. Arthur's eyes widened. Tomorrow? So fast, he exclaimed, his voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. I know, honey, Alice sighed, her own expression softening. I hate rushing like this, too. But your mom and dad's old friend from the Twin Horns are going to Xyrus as well, she explained, settling him back down on the bed. So they're taking us along. Your dad is with them right now. She leaned down and kissed his forehead, her voice laced with tenderness. I better not catch you staying up reading again. You can bring some books for the trip tomorrow. So go to sleep, Alice said, turning towards the door. As she left, Arthur looked at the ceiling, his thoughts drifting into the wonders the stars might have to offer. The next morning dawned bright and early, the sun casting a golden glow over the village as Arthur, his mother, Alice, and his father, Reynolds, made their way down the dirt road to meet their companions. Thanks again for taking us with you on this trip, Reynolds said, hugging a sturdy man in armor. Alice smiled warmly at the woman beside him. Arthur looked up with a quiet eagerness, his tiny hand reaching out to wave hello. Fellas, I want you all to meet my son. Reynolds, a handsome man with a confident smile, proudly gestured toward a small boy standing nearby. "Arthur, introduce yourself," he encouraged. Little Arthur, a picture of politeness, stepped forward and announced, "Hello, my name is Arthur Lewin. Thank you for coming with us to Xyrus." His father beamed with pride, patting Arthur's head affectionately. "Such manners," he exclaimed. Adam Crench, a red-haired man with a mischievous grin, knelt down to Arthur's level. "You sure Reynolds is your dad, kid?" he teased, playfully ruffling Arthur's hair. Arthur, taken by surprise, flailed his arms, startled by the sudden interaction. Suddenly, Angela Rose, a beautiful woman with long blonde hair, rushes forward, scooping Arthur into a tight embrace. "He's just too precious," she gushes, squeezing him tightly. "Be thankful you look more like your mom." Poor Arthur is caught in a bear hug, his face pressed against Angela's chest, unable to breathe. What's going on?" he gasps, struggling to break free. "I can't breathe." His little legs kick frantically as he tries to escape the suffocating embrace. Angela, her face etched with worry and a hint of panic, cries out, "Durden, you're hurting him." A man, identified as Durden Walker, a conjurer specializing in earth magic, has little Arthur by the scruff of his clothes, lifting him high in the air. Arthur, with wide, fearful eyes, can only think doom. Durden, a large and imposing figure, holds Arthur like a doll, seemingly oblivious to Angela's concern. The fear soon turns to comfort. In a touching moment, Durden is seen squatting down, cradling Arthur in his arms, embracing him tightly. He even gives Arthur reassuring pats. The mood shifts entirely, with the next image depicting a happy Arthur giving Durden a thumbs up. Durden smiles warmly, and a loyal dog appears to woof in cheerful agreement. However, the piece is soon interrupted by the arrival of Jasmine Flameworth, an augmenter specializing in dual daggers. Jasmine, with a stern expression, sits perched atop a wooden post. She gives a curt nod as Arthur looks up at her with curious blue eyes. Arthur is told, "Don't mind her, she just needs to get used to you." Jasmine is then seen walking towards a caravan, her back to Arthur. She extends a hand as if to say hello. "Nice to meet you, Arthur. My name is Helen Shard," the woman with piercing yellow eyes said, extending a gloved hand to the young boy. A quiver of arrows rested on her back, hinting at her profession. Below her, text proclaimed, "Helen Shard, augmenter, specialty, magic archery." "All right," a man exclaimed, clapping his hands together. "Now that everyone's gotten acquainted, let's prepare to move on." The scene shifted, showing the man being lifted into a covered wagon by another, while a red-haired woman reached out to assist. Next, the wagon's interior was revealed. Inside were three others, a blonde, a brunette, and little Arthur, all appearing ready for their journey. "Everyone ready?" a voice called out. "We're all good here," the blonde woman responded cheerfully. Suddenly, the wagons began to move, pulled by large, harnessed creatures that resembled striped, green lizards. "Let's go," someone shouted as the creatures, bearing the weight of the wagons, began to trot forward. Arthur leaned out the window of his wagon, his blue eyes wide with excitement. He watched the passing scenery. Then, an enormous mountain range appeared in the distance. The wagons made their way along a dusty trail, the journey truly beginning. However, under the veil of night, chaos erupted. A pack of monstrous wolves attacked. A woman with black hair leapt from the wagon with knives in hand. She moved gracefully, while a man struggled to fend off the wolves with a sword. Arrows flew. The magic archer Helen Shard was defending her group. The journey had taken a dangerous turn. The night air was crisp, and a scattering of stars dusted the darkening sky above the forest trail. A fire crackled nearby, casting a warm glow on the seated figure of a woman with auburn hair. Two figures approached. A man, broad-shouldered and weary, carried a pair of skinned wolves slung over his shoulder. Behind him, a woman in dark attire followed closely, her eyes sharp and observant. The flickering firelight revealed more figures grouped around it. A small boy, no older than 6, sat listlessly by the edge of the fire, his face etched with tiredness. Others sat around the campfire on logs, a motley crew of travelers. The boy, Arthur, sat with his cheek resting in his hand. A sword wrapped in cloth lay nearby, forgotten. A young woman with dark hair approached him. "How are you holding up, Arthur?" she asked gently. "Tired?" Arthur nodded twice, his expression weary. "Don't worry about it," she reassured him. "It's your first time traveling like this, I guess." In this life, sure. The conversation shifted, taking on a teasing note. So, your papa has been bragging nearly the entire way here that you're a genius mage? She said, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Did you really awaken a year ago? The young woman sat beside him by the fire. Arthur sat silently. Across the fire, a man with reddish hair observed them with a pensive look. Hey, Reynolds, he called out, addressing Arthur's father. I need to do a little stretching before going to sleep. He gestured towards Arthur. And you told me you've been sparring with your boy. Do you mind if I play around with Art? Arthur bristled, his small face hardening. Stretch out by yourself, he exclaimed defiantly. Reynolds, Arthur's father, approached with a slight smile. All right, but be careful, he cautioned. We just barely moved on from light strength and mana exercises into sparring. The man with red hair smiled back. Moments later, the woman in dark clothing suddenly grabbed Arthur by the scruff of his neck, lifting him effortlessly into the air. His eyes widened in shock and protest. In the background, the woman in dark clothing walked back to Reynolds and Arthur's mother. Arthur now sat in her arms. Normal kids my age would barely be able to climb a flight of stairs, Arthur thought. But I guess here, no one thinks fighting me is unusual. The night air hung crisp and clear as a small boy, barely reaching the taller grass, faced a looming figure. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, darted nervously towards the man's back, a simple wooden staff resting on his shoulder. Little did he know that the playful atmosphere was about to shift. The man, with vibrant pink hair framing a face etched with a predatory grin, turned. Ready, kid? He asked, his eyes glinting with amusement, a strip of bandage across his nose hinting at a previous skirmish. The boy, a hint of sweat forming on his brow, brandished his own wooden sword, mimicking a warrior's stance, but his nervousness betrayed him. The sound of whoosh accompanied each clumsy swing. The man then taunted the boy. You know how to reinforce your weapon, right? Boy genius? As he moved the staff at the same sound, but this time it was a deadly sound. As the man lunged, the boy froze, telepathically communicating with his father. Redhead is out for blood. Get me out of this mess. In the background, a tiger roared, emphasizing the danger he was about to be in. The boy's friends cheered for him to do his best. The man was ready and excited. The boy, on the other hand, thought, useless. Fine, he muttered under his breath, steeling himself, his eyes narrowing, a glint of determination replacing the fear. The game had begun. It started with an eye, a piercing blue gaze, full of focus and intent. You could almost feel the weight of the responsibility in that single, determined eye. Then, the scene shifted to a grand vision, a young boy standing beneath a towering knight in shining armor. The knight held aloft a radiant sword, a symbol of power and protection, mirroring the boy's own, smaller wooden sword. It was a moment of inheritance, of passing on a legacy. The grip tightened on the wooden sword, a small etched into the handle, signifying perhaps a family mark, a promise kept. The next glimpse we had was a silhouette. The boy, now a bit older, stood on a crest, sword at his side, bathed in a soft glow. He was ready, prepared to face whatever lay ahead. And then a burst of speed, dash, screamed across the panel, the world blurring as the boy, no longer a silhouette, charged forward, his face set in grim determination. He was on a mission, with a focus so sharp you could cut it with a knife. His target appeared, a taller figure, clad in dark armor, staff at the ready. The boy lunged, an unstoppable force of momentum, but the seasoned warrior held firm. Defend, the panel declared, the warrior's eyes narrowing, a look of seasoned experience crossing his face. The wooden sword clashed against the staff, the sound echoing in the silent space between panels, a harsh whoosh. The contrast was clear, a child with a warrior's heart facing a seasoned veteran. What would happen next was unknown, but the stage was set for a clash of wills, experience, and sheer determination. With a zap, the red-haired warrior unleashed a flurry of attacks, his staff slicing through the air with deadly precision. The air crackled, evidence of his skill and power. Suddenly, a small figure appeared in a poof of smoke, a boy, no older than 6, holding a wooden sword. His eyes narrowed in determination, but a misstep caused him to slip on the ground. Damn it, the boy exclaimed, frustration etched on his young face. This infantile body. He struggled to maintain his footing, his movements hampered by his small stature. The red-haired warrior's gaze sharpened, his eyes burning with a fiery intensity as he watched the boy stumble. With a wooden sword in hand, he began to practice a series of swings, the wooden blade emanating a faint glow with each strike. The boy swung the sword with a fierce expression. In a blur of motion, the red-haired warrior struck again, letting out a slash of wind as they moved to strike. The boy quickly dodged, but the warrior continued their series of strikes. It all started with a close-up, a look of determination etched onto a young face. Dirt flecked the skin, but the eyes were sharp, focused. Then, the scene exploded into motion. A figure with fiery red hair and a staff danced through the air, a whirlwind of strikes and defenses. He spun, leaped, and slammed the staff down with a resounding thump. The young boy, caught in the fray, could only exclaim in surprise, his eyes wide with disbelief. Swing! The text screamed as a strike came towards him, forcing him into a hasty dodge. Kick! He grunted, narrowly avoiding the attack. His face was contorted in a mixture of surprise and dawning realization. Then, a strange calm descended. The boy's expression changed, morphing into a look of intense concentration. His mind seemed to race, and then suddenly it clicked. At that moment, Newton's third law of motion came to mind. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. The world around him turned into a blur of green and motion as the red-haired figure, staff in hand, delivered another blow. But this time, something was different. This time, the boy understood. The swing landed, accompanied by a resounding whack, but it wasn't the end. There was more to this fight than just force. It was about understanding, about balance, about action and reaction. Thump! Arthur falls to the ground, eliciting a startled cry from his mother, Art. Apparently, that crash hurt quite a bit, judging by the kid's dazed expression as he sits on the hard ground. We then see him, bruised and a little worse for wear, facing off against an older man. Too hard, idiot, the man growls, slapping the boy upside the head. Ouch! Art yelps, rubbing his head. The man continues his tirade. Haven't taught him a fight, my ass. What sort of hellish training did you put him through to create this little monster? A knowing smirk spreads across another man's face. I didn't teach him that. He admits, looking amused. Then Arthur is being healed by his mother, who looks both concerned and suspicious. Is this what you've been studying? She asks sternly. Arthur, looking sheepish, replies, Well, yeah, I learned this by watching Dad and reading some books. As they all stand together, the redhead is still trying to get Arthur to teach him those movement techniques. Arthur is happy to describe one of the movements, so you just have to cross your back leg over your lead leg and then kick off with mana while you let your body almost fall. Then you have to... Okay, so it looks like we're starting with some kind of training. There's this little chibi guy kind of floating or flying, and then someone kicks him. He's sent flying into a tree, thump. A little later, he's stuck to it. Another person, probably his friend, says how? The kind of confused and impressed reaction. Several days passed since we began our journey to Zyra City. They arrived at a waterfall. A woman was washing a child in the water, and a man jumped in from the side. It looked like they were having a bath at a hidden oasis. During this time, my birthday also passed, the boy narrates. He was with his parents, receiving a gift. After that, everyone was on some rocks, and a man jumped into the water, making a splash. Everyone was having a good time. Adam, Helen, and my father's training continued with decent progress. I remember soaking in the cool water, a rare moment of peace, when suddenly my father came crashing down on top of me. It was complete chaos, with Jasmine and Helen reacting to the splash, and Adam watching in disbelief in the rocks. Despite the initial awkwardness, Jasmine had already succeeded in learning a few techniques. It still amazes me how Jasmine was able to grasp my instructions so quickly, especially when learning Feint Step. I recall one training session where my father, Adam, and I were demonstrating the dash, a blur of movement across the practice grounds, as Art watched on, wrapped in a towel, his eyes wide with fascination. Later, we were preparing to leave, packing up carts, and saying our farewells to those we had trained. I remember seeing Jasmine and Helen sitting on a rocky outcrop, while Arthur was standing with a woman, saying, Come on, Art. We're leaving now. Coming, Mom. A bright-eyed little boy, no older than 5, shouted, scrambling over some rocks with a cheerful grin. He was eager to catch up with his mother, it seemed. The next scene shifted to a precarious mountain road, where 2 covered wagons navigated a steep and dangerous path. They looked like they were struggling to maintain their balance on the uneven terrain. Then, a bird's-eye view of the wagons on a rocky surface near a dark, almost ominous-looking pool of water was shown. Suddenly, we cut to a close-up of a large, reptilian foot stepping on the rocks. The weight of the foot clearly cracked the stones beneath it. Inside one of the wagons, a man, probably in his late 20s, with vibrant red hair pulled back, reminisced, "You know, Art, I still remember your father getting us into all sorts of trouble." He was speaking to a younger version of the little boy from earlier, who was now holding a pretend sword, looking up at him with wide eyes. The man with red hair was on the ground, looking up at them with a mischievous glint in his eye. A woman with dark hair, wearing a mask and wielding a bow, was positioned at the very top of the tower. The red-haired man continued, "Pretty sure Ray wasn't the only one who caused trouble. Wasn't there a time when you accidentally set off?" He was interrupted by another woman with dark hair, who looked slightly embarrassed. "Oh no, what was that?" she asked, clearly flustered. The red-haired man simply chuckled, pointing at her playfully. "Never mind, just a little rodent, ha." Finally, we returned to the present, inside the wagon. The little boy, now with concern etched on his face, asked his mother, "You okay, Mom?" His mother, a beautiful woman with long, auburn hair, looked pale and weary, bringing a hand up to her face. The journey was clearly taking a toll on her, and her young son noticed everything. "Just a little tired, honey. I'll be okay," his mother reassured him, her voice soft and weary. Little Arthur, though, was worried. He watched her for a moment before quietly turning his attention to something else. He reached up, clutching a thick, dusty book and carefully pulling it down from a shelf. He then grabbed a small, tattered piece of paper that was pinned to the wall. He flipped through the pages of the book, squinting at the strange symbols and markings. He looked up again, a flicker of determination in his bright blue eyes. Arthur then intently read the mysterious text, his brow furrowing in concentration. He appeared to be growing more and more tense, and his eyes were starting to water. Something about the contents of the book was unsettling him. Suddenly, his face scrunched up in fear as tears welled in his eyes. Then, as the tension mounted, a menacing wave of pressure washed over him as the aura of a person filled the space around him. "Dum!" boomed in his mind. And then there were eyes, intense, red eyes peering down through a crack in the wall, accompanied by chilling words, "Teach me more." Arthur trembled and whimpered in fear. The boy's eyes widened in shock, and a chill ran down his spine. Suddenly, the world seemed to shake around him, causing him to scream out in horror. The world around him was a blur of fear and confusion. "What's going on?" a voice nervously asks as a group huddles together inside a wooden structure, their faces filled with concern. Suddenly, a shout echoes, "Bandits!" An elven woman, determined and fierce, yells, "Prepare to engage." Another woman steps forward, her eyes glowing with power, and chants, "Submit, O wind, and follow my will. Gather and protect." As arrows fly through the air, the woman's wind magic blasts forth, creating a swirling vortex that repels the attack. Inside, a young boy watches in wide-eyed fear as his mother pulls him close, shielding him from the danger. Finally, a figure emerges from the shadows, a dark-haired woman with a confident smirk, ready to confront the threat head-on. "Tap," she says as she steps into action. "All right, so it looks like things are getting pretty intense. We start with this stern-looking guy, all geared up in armor, snapping an arrow clean in half with his bare hands. You can practically feel the crack echoing in the air. He's not messing around. Then we cut to another formidable figure, a weathered man with a staff. He's grabbing onto the side of a makeshift wooden structure, his expression intense. Next, a red-haired warrior with a determined look is holding a spear, ready for a fight. He looks battle-ready, no doubt. Then suddenly, a dark, ominous scene. A drop of blood splatters onto the ground. Someone else has been shot with an arrow through the thigh and is also being held. They're clutching at it. The whole situation looks dire. Then we see a dark-haired archer. They're completely surrounded by arrows sticking into the ground and walls. The archer is jumping and dodging arrows, breaking their own bow as they draw it back, and tries to fire off more shots. They land on the ground and get back up to shoot again, but they are surrounded and overwhelmed. The next scene is just heartbreaking. We see a mother and child hiding in a makeshift shelter. The mother's face is filled with fear, and she's muttering, "Damn it," under her breath. Looking up, they realize they're surrounded by enemies on all sides, lining the cliffs. The situation is desperate. They're completely trapped. High atop a rocky precipice, 3 figures stood, bows drawn, silhouetted against the majestic backdrop of towering mountains. They were archers, ready, poised, their targets unseen but undoubtedly present in their minds. Unbeknownst to them, danger lurked much closer than they realized. Crouching low in the tall grass, hidden from sight, 3 menacing men crept forward, their faces twisted into cruel smirks. They were hunters of a different kind, predators with ill intentions. An axe, heavy and menacing, was suddenly slammed into the ground with a deafening thump, a blatant warning, a declaration of their violent arrival. And then the leader emerged, a hulking figure with a necklace of teeth and a scar etched onto his face. His grin was wide and predatory as he barked. "Pretty good catch, boys. Leave only the women and kids alive, understand? Damaged goods will only sell for less." His words hung in the air, chilling in their cold calculation. It was a world where lives were treated as commodities, where humanity had been stripped away to reveal something ugly and base. "It seems I've been living in a bubble for too long," a voice thought, a voice filled with a growing darkness. "I almost forgot that every world has its own share of filth like him." A young boy, his face a mask of dawning horror and outrage, stared ahead, his eyes wide and piercing as he overheard the bandit leader's plans. Damage? He didn't understand. Goods? A hand reached out, gripping a dark weapon. A decision had been made. Something was about to change. The little boy, face contorted in a fierce grimace, clutches a small knife. His intense blue eyes burn with determination as he stands protectively in front of a woman. She looks back at him, fear etched on her face, tears welling in her eyes. She looks so vulnerable, so scared. Then, in an instant, he throws himself forward, wrapping his arms around her in a desperate hug, burying his face in her side. She pulls him closer, whispering soothing words, "Don't worry, I'm here." Her eyes glisten with tears as she holds him tightly, offering comfort and reassurance. He peeks up at her, his blue eyes wide and filled with a mix of fear and reliance. Suddenly, an archer, face masked, draws back his bow, an arrow aimed directly at them. Shoot! The arrow flies through the air, a deadly projectile hurtling towards its target. Simultaneously, a strong man shouts, "Gather and guard!" A glowing orb emanates from his fist. The ground rumbles violently as he leaps into action. A chaotic scene unfolds, rocks cracking and exploding as the man with the orb creates a protective barrier around the wagon and the people, including the terrified woman and her little protector. An earth wall, massive and daunting, stood against the sky. The rumbling grew louder as something approached, splitting the wall into 2 jagged peaks. Arrows rained down, forcing a woman to pull a child into cover beneath a makeshift awning. With a determined expression, a blonde woman spun, deflecting the arrows with her magic. A hulking figure with a fur collar and a menacing axe led the charge, flanked by masked men wielding knives. Up above, a lone archer perched on a rock, raining down more arrows. The axe-wielding leader parried a sword strike. Sparks flew as the clash echoed. As the battle raged on the wall, another figure dashed through the fray, sword drawn. A blindfolded attacker stood dumbfounded as his friends were felled. With a resounding smack, the lone fighter took one down as well. The battle was fierce, and the earth wall became a chaotic arena. It started with a look of intense focus, a single blue eye gleaming with determination. Then a whirlwind of action. Someone, or something, moved with such incredible speed that the very air seemed to crackle. The word dash hung in the air as the figure smashed through enemies, leaving trails of impact and confusion. One poor soul was pinned to the ground, a grim look on the face of their attacker, who held them down with a brutal grip. But it was a trap. A blade descended from above, poised to strike, but it was too late. With a sudden, desperate thrust, the held-down figure pierced their attacker's arm. The word pierce exploding with the impact. A moment of grim satisfaction crossed his face, a predatory smile playing on his lips, a silent nod as he watched the chaos unfold. And indeed, chaos reigned. A woman, with a knowing smirk, also gave a confirming nod, as if this were all part of a meticulously planned strategy. Below, the battlefield swarmed with combatants. People, strange reptilian creatures, and overturned wagons. The scene was a brutal clash of survival. Then came 2 quick, decisive strikes. First, a dark-haired woman unleashed a slash, a violent stroke that silenced one foe with gruesome finality. And then, another woman, her red hair a fiery beacon, laid waste to those who opposed her. "Slash!" she cried, as a spray of blood confirmed her skills. It was a slaughter. He glared, one eye gleaming with fierce determination, flecks of blood dancing around him like fireflies. His red hair, a wild mane, accentuated his intense focus. The earth trembled under the crushing force of a massive blow. He dodged, a blur of red and black against the gray, thrusting forward, the silver of his weapon flashing. "Crush!" the brute roared, but it was too late. A single step, deceptively light, belied the deadly precision that followed. The attacker lunged, a whirlwind of controlled fury. Silver met flesh. Stab! 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 The sounds echoed in the air as the colossal figure was brutally impaled, a gruesome dance of death. He retreated, breathing hard, sweat streaking his face. The fight was far from over. A figure in black, agile and lethal, spun through the air, blades carving paths of destruction. Slash! Stab! The air crackled with the sounds of violence, the earth stained crimson. Then, with a sickening shing, another fell, silence forever. A close-up, a red eye, filled with cold, calculating fury. The hunt was on. The final figure, his face a mask of cruel amusement, brandished a whip, his eyes gleaming with sadistic anticipation. A terrified scream echoed, a prelude to the horrors to come. The game was afoot. The air crackled with tension, the word whip echoing the brutal impact as a blond man lashed out with a strange, rope-like weapon. A young man, caught in the attack, was flung backward, his limbs flailing, blood splattering as the whip tore through his defenses. The blond man, radiating malevolence, stalked forward, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "Stop struggling, baby," he taunted, his voice dripping with malice. "I'll make sure to train you so well, you'll be begging to stay with me in the end." His words hung heavy in the air, a promise of pain and domination. Suddenly, a blur of black and green descended from above. A woman, her dark hair pulled back with a green ribbon, lunged with a gleaming blade, her eyes narrowed in fierce determination. She was at a disadvantage, a voice in the back of a nearby young boy's mind considered. She's at a disadvantage against her opponent's range. The battle erupted in a flurry of movement, the whip snaking through the air, forcing the woman to weave and dodge, her blade a silver flash against the dull sky. With grim determination, the woman dodged whip-like attacks as the young boy's inner voice whispered, "But can I help? A fighter is one thing." Meanwhile, elsewhere, a young girl was caught in a precarious situation as a structure collapsed around her, trapping her beneath the rubble. It was utter chaos. A figure, buried beneath the same debris, struggled to free himself, his face grim, a trickle of blood running from his lip. He looked up, his eyes filled with a burning rage. A nearby boy's inner voice was still in action. "But do I have a chance against an adult augmenter with this body?" "Ashone!" The shout ripped through the air as a woman, hair in disarray and eyes wide with terror, clung to the side of a rocky outcrop. Behind her, a small boy stood on a boulder, his face a mask of confusion and concern. The scene quickly shifted to a close-up of the boy's face. His brows furrowed, his eyes narrowed in anger, a vein throbbing in his temple. Then the reason for their fear came into view. A hulking, scarred man, armed and imposing, stood atop a ridge, silhouetted against the sky. The boy, now older, faced his mother, his expression urgent. "Mom, you have a heal, Dad. Hurry," he implored, but his mother trembled, her face etched with fear as she looked towards the injured man beside her. The injured man was their father. There's something wrong with Mother, the boy thought. Tears streamed down the mother's face as she stuttered. But I can't. Why isn't she healing Father?" the boy wondered. The father, despite his injuries, managed a weak smile, blood trickling from his mouth. He reached out to his wife, his voice strained. "I'm fine, honey. My injuries aren't life-threatening. Don't worry and do your best." He then turned to his son. "Art, listen carefully." He continued, "After your mother uses her healing spell, those bad men are going to go after her. I'll be able to fend off the leader, but not if I have to worry about protecting you too. Take your mother back down the trail we came from, and don't stop." His voice was filled with a resolve that belied his wounded state. "What are you talking about, Dad? I'm not leaving you. I can fight. You saw me." The young boy, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and defiance, clutched at his shirt. His father, injured, with blood trickling from his mouth, gently placed his hand on the boy's head. "Listen to me, Arthur Lewin," he began, his voice strained. "I know you can hear. That's why I'm entrusting your mother to you. Protect her." Another trickle of blood escaped his lips. "Protect the baby inside her." A memory flashed. A moment of joy as the father held his wife, his hand resting on her pregnant belly. "Just a little tired, honey. I'll be okay," she said, her smile strained. But now, reality was setting in. My mother was pregnant. The father tapped Arthur's head again, his eyes filled with love and sorrow. "I was planning on telling you when we got to Cyrus, but..." He struggled for breath. He grabbed Arthur's shirt, his gaze intense. And with newfound resolve and determination burning in his blue eyes, Arthur vowed, "I'll protect Mom. I promise." A vow hangs in the air, shimmering with an ethereal glow. Little Arthur, no older than 7, stands firm, a tiny beacon of determination against the chaos erupting around him. "Get ready, Art," he orders, his voice surprisingly steady. His mom is kneeling, hands shimmering with green magic, desperately trying to heal his father. "Don't die on me, Dad," Arthur whispers, his blue eyes betraying the fear he tries so hard to suppress. The air crackles with danger. "Come on, Mom. Now," Arthur yells, tugging at his mother's dress, urging her to flee. They're running, desperation etched on their faces, his father staggering behind, doing his best to protect them. They have a healer, a valuable asset, but also a target. They've got 4 mages on their side. A tense voice confirms, a warning shouted amidst the sounds of battle. "Son of a..." An enemy warrior roars, his face contorted in fury, realizing their advantage. "They have a healer. Don't let her get away," he screams. Amidst the desperate retreat, a warrior with fiery red hair appears, a whirlwind of motion and fury. "Hurry," he yells, a fierce protectiveness in his eyes. "Bonk, lay down. He's their shield, their guardian." "Dash." The warrior's blows clash with deafening force. "I'll hold him down. Get out of here," he shouts, fighting to buy them precious seconds, knowing the odds are stacked against them. High on a rocky cliff face, a woman in a tan dress is carefully climbing, with a young boy struggling behind her, both seemingly trying to escape something. Suddenly, a blur, a glint of metal, someone's attacking them. A man with dark brown hair and a red bandana is drawing his sword, a look of deadly intent in his eyes. He throws a large, crude sword, and the impact makes the woman cry out. The boy, in a burst of adrenaline and sheer protectiveness of the woman, meets the blade with his own, smaller sword, a desperate clash of steel against steel. The sound echoes, whack. The boy struggles, face contorted with effort, but then, crack! His sword shatters under the force, splintering into pieces. The boy is thrown back by the impact, and the bandana-clad attacker stares in disbelief, muttering, "How the hell?" He barely has time to react before another arrow is fired, this time finding its mark. Snap! A brutal strike, ending the attack, and possibly more. "Don't stop! Arthur!" A determined voice cuts through the air as a woman with dark hair and piercing yellow eyes commands. She stands ready for battle. Behind her, another woman with long blonde hair seems caught in the chaos. Then we're transported to a different scene. A mother and son fleeing in terror, their faces etched with fear and concern. Something is clearly amiss. The boy, Arthur, has a determined look on his face, while his mother has a look of panic. A sense of unease settles in, emphasized by a simple statement. Something's wrong. Suddenly, a group emerges from the shadows, a menacing assembly of individuals. A muscled man with a wild grin, a hooded figure, and a variety of warriors stand shoulder to shoulder, exuding an aura of danger. Another text bubble points out, they're supposed to be for mages. The action picks up again as the woman from the first scene leaps into action, dodging attacks. Her companion uses magic to create a whirlwind. Jump! The battle unfolds, a clash of swords and magic. 1. A redhead strikes at her opponent with speed and precision. 2. An axe connects with a thud, sending dust and debris flying. The conflict intensifies. 3. Where's the last one? Forget the plan, Damien. Don't let them live. Who is he talking to? Then, as the ground begins to rumble, a swirling vortex of blue energy starts to take shape. Shit! A boy, eyes wide with worry, watches in horror as a gigantic blue blast erupts from the ground, sending shockwaves outwards. The blast soars upwards, threatening to engulf the two figures standing precariously on a cliff. Swirl. Shoom. Even if I can use mana to dodge this, Mom won't be fast enough to... Damn it. Sorry for the bruises, Mom. He turned sharply, knowing that if he couldn't make it, he wanted to bring the mage down with him. He pushed his mother away from the oncoming attack and pulled her to safety with a burst of mana. He thought throw, and with a splash, he launched a sharp weapon, stabbing the enemy as they cried out, Gah. Okay, so this kid is in a really tough spot. He's flying through the air, all torn up, surrounded by what looks like water shards. He's yelling, pull, and there's this bright light coming from his hand, like he's using some kind of magic to escape. You can see how frantic he is, with his hair all over the place and his clothes ripped. Then we see his thoughts. Let's hope this mana string holds out. So, whatever he's doing depends on this magical connection. The next shot is wider, and things become clearer. It's like they've triggered a cave-in or landslide. You see two other figures, one on the edge of a cliff, and the other dangling, connected by that mana string to the first kid who's flying through the air. It's a very quick moment, and things get more intense. Now we have a close-up of a hand reaching out, with the word grab above it. Then crack. The cliff breaks. That mana string is really being tested, holding the falling kid while the other struggles to grab on. We see the kid who's falling from his point of view. He's desperately looking up, trying to climb. He is desperately reaching to grab his hand. And crack again, another part of the cliff is crumbling. It's all going wrong. Then, you see the first figure falling, still connected to the mana string. The other person on the cliff is upside down now, desperately reaching with his own hand, trying to save his falling friend. And there's this huge, strong guy on the cliff, swinging a massive sword, trying to stop a giant chunk of rock from falling. He's screaming, giving it his all. Finally, you see the whole scene, the giant rock crumbling, the sword-wielding figure below, and the small figures of the other two caught in the collapse, with one of them still connected to that precarious mana string, dangling above the earth. It's definitely a life or death situation. The young boy, with tears streaming down his face mixed with dirt and cuts, managed a weak smile. Looks like everyone else will be okay, he thought, a bittersweet relief washing over him. A pang of longing struck him, a quiet, heartfelt wish. Damn, I always wanted to be an older brother. The scene shifted to a sterile, opulent room. A woman, her brow furrowed with concern, carefully carried a pillow. She hurried through the doorway, the sound of the door opening echoing in the otherwise silent chamber. The perspective widened to show a vast, chessboard-like floor. Three figures stood amidst the giant pieces. Is everyone here okay? One of them asked, the words hanging in the air. A regal figure, adorned in fine robes, sat upon a grand throne. An old man with a long white beard stood before him, head bowed in respectful greeting. King Gray, he intoned. A young man with blonde hair, clad in a white coat, stood in a hallway lined with portraits. He gazed thoughtfully at one, then another, his expression unreadable. He stopped before a portrait titled The Council 30XX, and then his gaze was drawn to another portrait which featured the figure of King Gray, dual winner of the country. And so, the threads of different lives, different stories began to weave together, a tapestry of longing, duty, and power unfolding before the reader. In a world riddled with problems like decreasing birth rates and limited resources, wars were replaced by duels and armies by kings. I was one of them. Admiring your handiwork, I see. A voice echoed in the grand hall. I turned to see an elder, a member of the council, observing me from a plush chair. While being part of the council is rewarding, he continued, his tone laced with a hint of something I couldn't quite place. I won't lie and say I'm not envious of the fame and glory you kings receive upon victories. I watched him, his words a familiar drone. Anyway, to what do I owe the pleasure of this visit? He finally asked. I reached out, a slow, deliberate movement, and then offered it to him. I'm retiring macaron. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Suddenly, a voice, frantic and distant, cut through the silence. Gray, hold on. My hand trembled as I touched my forehead. I spent my whole life for the sake of being the strongest. And for what? Fame? Glory? I was still an orphan, with everyone I cherished gone. I'd give up everything I had in that life for the chance to go back to Ashbur and see them all again. Where am I? How? Am I still alive? Damn. He grimaced, cheeks puffed out, a thin stream of something viscous clinging to his face. It looked like he was trying to hold back something. Then, RETCH. The sky, a hazy gold, was ripped apart by dark streaks. 2. What were they? Birds? No, too angular. He was sprawled on the ground, covered in grime, his skin tinged green. His clothes were torn and bloodied. He looked sick, defeated. His eyes, though open, seemed unfocused, lost in some internal turmoil. Dark shadows stretched out from him, blending with the forest floor. His eyes flickered open again, barely. Just slits of green light in the gloom. A beat. Silence. Then a soft FWO, like air being gently pushed past a small opening. He was lying on his back, a single green leaf resting on his forehead. Then a tiny sniff, as if trying to catch a familiar scent. The leaf still lay undisturbed. He took a deep breath, a ragged SHFF that seemed to rattle in his chest. His expression didn't change, still vacant, still distant. He pushed himself up, his hand instinctively reaching for the leaf. He held it up to the light, examining it with a detached curiosity, his features still tinged green. He was lying sprawled on the forest floor, surrounded by scattered berries and pouches. His clothes were torn, his body bruised. He lay motionless, utterly vulnerable. The hand clenched tightly around the dark, craggy rock, knuckles straining. A determined, almost angry, face peers over the edge of the green hill, eyes narrowed and a flush rising on the cheeks. Nom nom nom. A small voice mumbles, stuffing the rock into a tear-streaked face, dirt smudged across chubby cheeks. A gulping sound follows as the rock is forced down, swallowed with evident difficulty. Thud. The boy falls to the ground, disoriented, a small sack beside him. He lies still, bruised and bleeding, closing his eyes. Thanks for the meal. He murmurs, his voice fading. Birds chirp innocently in the sky above. The boy opens his eyes, still flushed and bruised, a faint smile playing on his lips. He lies back against the trees, his limbs heavy, head lolling to the side, obviously weakened but peaceful. Thud. He falls again, this time with more visible scrapes and dirt. He lays on his back, exhaling a sigh. It starts with closed eyes, eyes that seem to belong to someone powerful, someone who's about to unleash something. Then, suddenly, there's this chilling image of a figure seemingly ripped apart, a dark, almost skeletal outline against a stark white backdrop. It's unsettling, a prelude to something terrible. Maybe, cut to a young boy, dirty and bedraggled, stumbling through a rain-soaked forest. He's hunched over, clearly in distress, his bare feet sinking into the mud. His face appears, contorted in pain, with fresh cuts and scrapes marring his skin. He's been through something brutal. He cries out, a desperate "H-O-O," echoing through the trees. He looks up, fear etched on his face, and cautiously approaches some kind of dark, metallic structure. He reaches out, his small hand grasping a rope or cord, and he starts to pull. He pulls with all his might, and we see a knife, dripping with what looks like blood, pulled free. He loses his balance, tumbling backward, knife in hand. He lands hard, his face a mask of shock and determination. I survived that? How long has it been? I don't even have one memory. And where am I? Snap. Oh, you're awake? Huh? Oh, you're awake? Thump, thump, thump. Hide. The young boy, his face marked with scrapes and fear, stared in disbelief at the corpse lying still in the forest clearing. Don't tell me the corpse is... He muttered, his mind racing with the most horrifying possibilities. He nervously braced himself. I swear to God, if it gets up. Just then, a voice echoed, unseen, unheard, but somehow present. How is your body? It asked. Startled, the boy stumbled backward with a PFFFFFD of breath. He looked around, fear etched on his face. Don't worry, the voice continued reassuringly. The corpse won't be reanimating, if that's what you're afraid of. The boy let out a sigh of relief, yet uncertainty lingered. Wait, he thought, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. Don't just trust this unknown voice, no matter how silky smooth and dignified it sounds. Gripping a small knife tightly, the boy confronted the unknown speaker. Who are you? Are you the one that saved me? A small spark zapped from his knife, as if he expected an immediate answer. Then, a small animal scurried away with a shrack, and the boy was startled once more. A voice responded again, yes, to your second question. As for the first, you'll find out once you arrive at my dwelling. The boy was visibly conflicted. Should he trust this mysterious, disembodied voice? What was waiting for him at this dwelling? His adventure had just begun, and the stakes were higher than he could have ever imagined. You sound pretty confident that I'll even try to find you, the young boy spat out, his voice full of defiance, despite the bruises on his face and tattered clothes. Well, a voice echoed in his mind. I'm the only one that will be able to get you home from this place. Suddenly, the boy's eyes widened. That's right, home. His memories flashed through his mind. Ray, Alice, and the twin horns, his baby sibling. Are they all right? Did they reach Xyrus safely? Panic welled up inside him. He paused, taking a deep breath, and cleared his throat. Ahem. Turning toward the forest, he called out, Mr. Voice, may I inconvenience you for directions, so that you may grace me with your presence? A chuckle echoed through the trees. He took a tentative step forward, clutching a small stick for support. You catch on quick, Arthur Lay Win, the voice remarked. Although, it's a bit rude to refer to a lady as Mr., but your sentiment is there, so yes. The boy's face clouded with confusion. Wait, how did she know my... His eyes glowed with a dangerous, almost otherworldly light, a stark contrast to the fear that had been etched on his face moments before. That's all for today. For the next part, make sure to subscribe my channel Fire Recap. And you don't forget to share and like the video. I am out.